A quick personal history about myself. I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, grew up in Pocono Mountains, Pennsylvania. I joined the Army right out of high school, where my high school buddies were enjoying the beach. I was in the swamps of Alabama, enjoying an Alabama summer in basic training in the Army. I actually joined as a nuclear weapons specialist. And you know, you have this controversy now about worrying about 18-year-olds with guns. I was actually playing with real-life nuclear bombs when I was 18 years old. The Army had me doing that for 3 years. I met these guys that wore these cool hats called Green Berets, and they had these really neat jobs. And I said, man, that's a pretty cool job. I'd like to do that job. So I put my paperwork in, went through the training. It was long, it was tough. Graduated from Special Forces training, got my cool green hat that everybody knows John Wayne in the movie and whatnot. My first mission in Special Forces was to go to, well, we went to Pakistan and then go and train the Mujahideen to force the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan out of Afghanistan. I mean, my first mission was to go fight communism and to defend the people who had their country invaded by a communist country. I came back from that, turned around just a year and a half later, went to Desert Storm. Again, you know, turned around to protect folks that had just had tyrants take their freedom away. And I got to train the Kuwaiti volunteer force, people that came from all over the world. The Emir of Kuwait said, you need to come back to Kuwait and fight for your country or you're going to lose your citizenship. That's a nifty concept, I might add, if you didn't fight. So we had car dealers, teachers, all sorts of people, and we had to train them in 3 weeks. And then we took them into Kuwait City and liberated Kuwait City. If you want to see emotion, watch people who had their country ripped and stolen from them, and then watch what happens when they fight to get it back. Something that we take for granted here with our freedom. Got involved in a bunch of missions in Africa. We had a lot of problems in Africa. We had Somalia, we had Sierra Leone, we had Liberia. I was involved with the African Crisis Response Initiative there that helped work with African peacekeepers in those countries. Got to go to South Africa after apartheid fell and retrain the South African Army. Came back from that. I was an instructor at the Special Forces School at Fort Bragg. I was the senior instructor for the Special Operations Combat Medic Course. I trained every Navy SEAL corpsman, every Army Ranger medic, every Air Force pararescue unit, and every Special Forces medic that went through the program between 1997 and 2000. Some of the greatest men you could ever imagine. Many of them have unfortunately died fighting for their country in the last few years. Was assigned to the 3rd Special Forces Group after that at Fort Bragg. Did a few more missions, and then unfortunately on September 11th, we all know the tragedy that befell this nation when some people that don't share our values attacked us in a sneaky, violent, vindictive, and dirty manner. And I was on an airplane on September 13th, literally 2 days later, flying over to Uzbekistan to be involved in what would be known as the invasion of Afghanistan. We were one of the first guys in Special Forces. Always seems to have the history of being the first guys to get involved in everything. I was in Afghanistan until May of 2002. I was involved in a lot of those famous operations. Probably the most known over there was Operation Anaconda. It was an unbelievable experience. During that operation, we were with a bunch of Afghans that were fighting alongside of us, fighting the Taliban, and they were ambushed in a Taliban ambush. And I was a Special Forces medic at the time. I was the only medic at the scene. I had 13 critically wounded Afghan soldiers that I worked on feverishly to save their lives, and I was able to save all but one. Unfortunately, I lost one of them. But I was able to save the lives of the rest of them, and I received the Bronze Star from my commander for my efforts to save their lives, because it had a material impact on the rest of the Afghan soldiers that were fighting with us, that they saw us put in such an effort to save their lives and protect them that after that they would follow us and do anything we asked. It was an important thing. Came back to Fort Bragg after that, turned around and prepped and went right back over to Romania, believe it or not, is where we staged for the invasion of Iraq. So it was nice by the Black Sea in the middle of winter. Not really, now I know why a lot of people don't dig Romania in the winter. There was nobody there. It was like a ghost town because it was cold over there. But left Romania and infiltrated into northern Iraq. We were going to be what was known as the screening and reconnaissance forces for the 4th Infantry Division that was supposed to use Turkey to launch the attack into northern Iraq. Unfortunately, the Turkish government had a change of heart at the last minute. And then the Iraqis, who had arrayed all their troops in northern Iraq, were getting ready. They were sending these flatbed trailers to go up and pick up all these trucks and tanks and stuff. And then Tommy Franks called my commander, Colonel Charlie Cleveland. I think he's a 3-star general now, but at the time he was a colonel. And he said, "Colonel, I need you to do something to keep those 13 Iraqi divisions busy." And he was like, "I got 2 battalions of Special Forces and a SEAL team. And you want me to keep 13 Iraqi divisions busy?" And he said, "I don't care how you do it." He says, "I got to keep them guys pinned down." So we had an operation, it was called Operation Viking Hammer. Our job was to just drive into enemy territory and pick fights with the Iraqi army. Which is, if you're a Special Forces guy and you got a lot of fire-breathing young guys with you, that's a mission that a lot of guys look forward to. But as we got into it, we took on and bit off, in some cases, more than we could handle. In one particular battle, we were attacked by what was reinforced armored battalion. It had 24 armored personnel carriers, 8 tanks, main battle tanks, attacked us. We had 8 Humvees and 21 Americans with a handful of Kurdish fighters that were with us. We fought the Iraqi army for 4.5 hours on the side of a mountain in northern Iraq. Shoulder-fired anti-tank missiles, and I was involved in what was at the time the largest single armor engagement of the war in Iraq, and it is still to this day. We took out 16 Iraqi armored vehicles with missiles, a bunch of others with 50 caliber machine guns, and I was recommended for the Silver Star for that battle, but an Army 2-star general said, "Well, Antenori only took out 2 tanks, and this other guy took out 5. So the guy that took out 5, Jason Brown, my weapons sergeant, they gave him the Silver Star, and they downgraded mine to a Bronze Star for valor, which is fine by me. Jason did a fabulous job. But we made the front page of the New York Times. Not every day you make the front page of the New York Times. Nobody believed what we did. They said, "What now? 21 Americans took out how much and what?" Tommy Franks had to send like 3 or 4 sit reps back because nobody could believe that this had happened. But it was a phenomenal thing, and we were very lucky, and the good Lord was on our side that day. And I only had 2 of my guys that were wounded during that battle. I didn't lose anybody. And as a team sergeant, I was the team sergeant at the time. Being able to bring all your guys home is a great feeling when you're on that airplane after that, flying back. Got back. Broke my foot on a parachute jump at Fort Bragg. Gained a little weight, got a little slower. Tried to recover, I just couldn't get back in the game. I had one of those career-ending injuries. I was 37 years old. All the guys that I was in charge of were all in their 20s, all in good shape, and I was like, okay, come to the end of the road. Now I got to make a different career change. Put in my paperwork to retire. Was fortunate enough to get a job offer from a large defense contractor in Tucson. Could that be? My wife and I, when I came here for the interview, she fell in love with Southern Arizona. We came here in March, which I think you got to give them credit for bringing us here in March. If it had been like August, it may have been a little different, but it brought us here in March. She fell in love with the area. She did a lot of work on trying to find a good school for our young kids at the time. That was back in 2004. My kids are grown up now. I got one who's a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate this year, and the other one's a sophomore. Great kids. My youngest is planning on going to West Point. He's in the West Point prep program that the Army has. He's trying to get in, which will be cool. I'll have to salute him, but I'll be able to handle that. I got involved with the Republican Party immediately upon hitting the ground here in Arizona because I still had this desire to serve and stick up and fight for the things that I went overseas and fought for. And I was like, I saw a lot of the liberty and the freedom that me and my buddies put our life on the line for being eroded away by people that really didn't seem to care and didn't have stock in this country. They just seemed to just say, you know what, well, we'll surrender this little liberty or that little liberty or this little bit of freedom because it'll make us safer, it'll do this for us. But they were really taking away, nibble by nibble, bit by bit, everything that this country has stood for over 230 years. And it was sad to watch it. So I got involved. I ran for Congress in 2006. I lost. I came in 4th place in a 5-way race. But I didn't, I didn't take it as a big blow to me. Just like I always did, you get up. Okay, well, let's get back in the game, dust that one off and get back in there. Turned around, ran for the State House in 2008. Hard-fought race. I had an establishment candidate that was very well funded. He outspent me 3-to-1. 3-to-1. But I had a great ground game, a great bunch of people helped me out. I had, Russell come in and help me raise some money, enough money to get my message out, which is so critical. And I was able to win that election by 450 votes. Got elected to the legislature. I was up there fighting the battles over in the House. The 2 weeks in, we had a vote on a budget from the previous legislature that had basically gotten rolled over by Janet Napolitano and agreed to vote out a budget that the day the ink was dry on it was $800 million in the hole. Before it even got to her desk, it was an $800 million budget with a bunch of borrowing and gimmicks and rollovers and a bunch of other stuff. And they brought us in. I was a young freshman. I remember them saying, you got to vote for this. And we're like, what is it? And they're like, this is the budget. And we're like, can we read it? And we're like, well, we ain't got time because we got to get this done. You guys got to vote this out right now. And there were 9 freshmen, 9 of us, over in the House that said, there's this stuff going on now about people in Washington not reading bills. If we don't read this bill after we've been talking about it, we're hypocrites. We're no different than they are. So we had to actually bring in some staffers, sit down with us, and we made them go through the budget with us and explain the budget, which was an eye-opening experience because as they were going through the budget, they were talking about certain things that were in there that we were like, well, why are we spending money on that? And they're like, well, I don't know. This was the negotiated budget. We're like, well, we're not going to spend that kind of money. There was money in there. There was $10 million for a road project in a particular state senator's district that he'd been trying to get built for years. He wanted that $10 million in there. There was money in there, corporate handouts to companies in the state of Arizona. Just handouts. Money, $22 million. There was a bunch of other things in there that were like, you're asking us to make a significant impact in people's lives. Some people may view that as harsh or mean or whatever. But at the same time, we can't turn around and allow spending on there. So we all got together, 9 of us, and we went to the Speaker of the House and we said, we're not voting for this budget. And he was like, what do you mean you're not voting for this budget? So we're not, it's got pork in it. We're not going to vote for it. You're asking us to make significant cuts, and we're going to take a lot of political heat for these cuts, but I'm not going to take that political heat at the same time with a bunch of pork still in this budget. And we all banded together. So one by one, they drag us into the Speaker's office, and the Speaker tries to, encourage us to change our minds. And we all held strong. We said, no, until you cut out this 40-some million bucks of extra pork, we're not changing our mind. And then they dragged us one by one up to the governor's office. And I had poor Jan Brewer look at me saying, oh, Representative Antenori, this is so important. I've been in office just a few weeks. This is already the key thing. If we don't get this budget out, I'm going to look bad. The Democrats are going to say I can't lead. I'm going to have this. I really need you to vote for this budget. I said, Governor, I'll be happy to vote for it as soon as you guys cut the pork out. And she said, well, there's so many agreements. You guys are the only guys holding this up. If you would vote for this, then on the next budget, we'll work with you on the next budget. And one by one, we walked in there, and she tried to get us. And one by one, we walked out. And as I would walk out, and the other guys were in the waiting room waiting to go in there. So we all knew, as we were you would see each guy come out and give him the thumbs up because we knew everybody had stood strong. And we all said, no, we're not going to vote for it. And we forced leadership in the House and the governor to take that out of the budget. And we caught a lot of grief from that. We were threatened with all of our bills dying. We were threatened with never having another opportunity to negotiate on the budget. We said, well, we're going to hang strong because our constituents sent us up here to do a job, and we're not up here to make friends and bend over for folks up here. We're here to bend over for the folks back in our district. And we stood strong. Freshmen, Senator Melvin was part of that club. We all went up there together. And we said, we're going to fight this fight. So we held strong on that. That sent the message. That started the tone. That this new crop that you sent up there, these freshman conservatives, In 2008, we're part of a group that said, you know what, we're done with the gimmicks, we're done with the spending, we're done with the bloated government, we're actually going to do something to balance this budget and get this state back in action. And then after that, we stood strong. And our numbers grew from 9. The next year we were at 14, and last year we were like at 27, I think, standing strong. And how your numbers grow when people start to see how effective you start to become just by standing strong on your principles. It brings other people on board. They get encouraged to say, well, you know, they won't be able to pick us off one by one if we all stand together. And this last year, when other people were trying to encourage us, and I call them the tax eaters, were up there, you know, banging on everybody, giving them the tier treatment, begging them to not cut this or cut that, we said, we can't do it. We have to balance this budget. When we ran in 2010, we ran for re-election, you know, and Al Melvin and the rest of us were there. We said, we're running to balance this budget, no more gimmicks, no more sweeps, no more rollovers, no more garbage. We're gonna balance this thing. And we stood strong and we balanced that budget. And it sent the message again that it could do it. You know, Russell had talked about it. You got to understand what was going on. The state of Arizona had the biggest per capita budget deficit in the country. That per person, the share of the deficit was bigger in Arizona than in any other state, more than California, more than Illinois. But we made some tough decisions against a lot of political pressure, against a lot of doom and gloom predictions by the media. They would say, oh, the state was going to burn down, the sky was going to rain fire and brimstone, and the earth was going to open up and swallow us if you guys vote for this. They called it draconian, they called it cruel, they had all these names for it. Well, the funny thing is, we got that budget out, the governor signed it, and the next day the Senate came out. And everybody went to work, everybody went to school, the world went on, and nobody really noticed. Nobody really noticed we reduced spending 22%. Nobody really noticed we reduced the size of government 15%. Nobody really noticed. There were some people that noticed, but those people were used to getting all that government money, and all of a sudden they realized that they weren't going to be getting it no more. But the taxpayers were the ones that really started to notice. I started getting all these emails thanking me for standing strong and balancing the budget. And saying, finally, we got somebody up there that made a promise when he ran, and then he kept it. And we promises made, promises kept. And that was a model that we kind of ran on, saying, look, we've got to continue this because the trust of the Republican Party at the federal level was lost because a lot of Republicans ran that they would do all this stuff. And then when they got up there, they turned over and they spent just like Democrats. And the voters rightfully kicked them out of office. And then they turned around and they said, okay, we're going to give you guys another chance. And they put in this past election cycle Republicans to take the majority of the House back. Because they saw the bad bill of goods that they were sold by the Democrats up there. But now we got to finish the job. We have a handful of freshmen in Congress. There's 55 of them that are like the 9 of us that are banding together as long as they can to stand up to their leadership up there that wants to continue the spending and the increasing the debt ceiling. They're not willing to make the cuts that need to be made to balance this budget and make the reforms necessary to balance this budget. They need help. They need more guys up there to make sure that they have momentum to make those hard decisions that we made here in Arizona. There's a lot of good people in this race. You know, you have Jesse Kelly's a good young man. You know, I've known him, I supported him last year. But this is a different race than it was last year. And let me explain to you why. In the special election on January 12th, as soon as Ken Bennett, the Secretary of State, certifies that election, whoever wins that election will be sworn in the next day in Washington, D.C. It's not like when you're elected in November, when you have all of November, all of December, and the first week of January to get your feet wet and get your staff built and do the transition because you're not sworn in until the first week of January. You're going to be sworn in the next day. You've got to have somebody that understands the ground game, somebody that knows the process, somebody who has demonstrated the ability to hit the ground running. I hit the ground running in my first year in the legislature. I got a budget stuck in my face 2 weeks in the office. And I'm going to get a budget stuck in my face when I get up to Washington, D.C. But you got to have somebody that knows the process, knows how to slow it down if he has to slow it down, knows how to tear it apart and look at it and make sure that he doesn't get run over. Somebody who's old enough and experienced enough and wise enough to stand strong and not bend when that pressure comes. I got a bachelor's degree in health science with an emphasis towards pre-med and a minor in biology. I've got, and the media won't tell you that. They try to paint me, this is the way they do. we're all the knuckle draggers up there. They try to Neanderthals. You know, they don't want to let anybody know that I got a 3.94 GPA when I graduated. They don't tell you that in pre-med. They don't tell you that. They try to create this thing that we're all uneducated and we hate education. But I don't hate education. None of us hate education. We want what's best for our kids. You know, I've got a good education. I worked for my education. I studied hard. I prepped for my tests. And I had the discipline to do that. And I paid for it. And you got to have that mindset. Woody Hayes, the coach of Ohio State, had this great quote. If you give anything to someone for free, you cheapen what you've given them, and then you cheapen the person that you gave it to. And that is what's happened in this country. We have lost the flavor of earned value, of work ethic, of fighting or working hard to get something. It tastes so much better. And I learned this when I was like 5. I wanted to buy a 10-speed bike. All my buddies were getting these nice, and I had this crummy 1-speed bike that was put together with like 4 different bikes. You know, and I told my dad, I said, hey Dad, can I get